Hello, my name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director of the Illinois Principals Association. Thanks for joining me for this IPA talk. Really pumped about this topic. We're going to be discussing with my guest here, Joe Fatheree. Joe, of course, we're going to be talking about AI just to set this up, but you're a longtime educator, well known and world renowned, of course, and former Illinois Teacher of the Year several years ago. And then I pulled it up because I got to make sure that I read this right. And I'm going to look over to my other screen just to make sure I read it right. And I remember when all of this was going down that you were recognized as one of the top 10 teachers on the planet back in 2016 by the Barkey Foundation, who did this work in collaboration with the Global Teacher Prize and all of that stuff. So obviously, kudos for all of that and appreciate your good work over the years. Just I'll give you an opportunity to make sure I'm not missing anything to plug into that.
Well, no, thank you. That's that's all because I've been able to stand on the shoulders of a lot of giants, including an awful lot of talented students over the years. I was blessed to teach 33 of my 34 years in Effingham Unit 40. And the last several, I ran a pre-engineering program, an innovation program, and our kids traveled. I mean, they were asked to go to UNESCO in Paris to speak at the International Summit on Human Rights. They've had their film footage shown in every country on the earth on the same day as part of a project with the UN. And, I could go on, but those opportunities generated just out of working with those great kids and just being in a district that supported this innovative growth in kids. But it also, outside of the classroom, it opened a lot of doors for me. And so for several years while I was teaching full-time at Effingham Unit 40, I was also one of the founders of Advance Illinois that's getting ready to have its 15th anniversary coming up, I think, next week. And I was thrilled to have the opportunity to help launch the National Network of State Teachers of the Year in Washington, D.C. And I would work all day at school, come home in the evening, and I was their director of strategic projects, which put me deep into academic research. I worked directly as a liaison for STEM with Microsoft, U.S. Department of Ed, 100K in 10, and a lot of other organizations. And what was really interesting about that and the Global Teacher Prize was these just large networks of world-class teachers and doors open to organizations that I'd never really seen behind before. And because I was doing STEM work and I was really the technology support, the point person for technology for Instoy, it put me in a position where I started seeing all of the good things that were happening with educational technology. And of course, my lab was that. And so I would bring a lot of these ideas back, work with my kids, talk to other teachers. And I also started seeing a lot of the things that concerned me. Just about overuse. I think one of the best things that ever happened with if there was a silver lining in the clouds with COVID, was that a lot of our kids got one-to-one devices. One of the worst things that ever happened out of COVID was our kids got one-to-one devices because, it just staff never had the time to be able, and leadership didn't have the time. We were just trying to get stuff out the door to connect our kids.
Yep.
And so I don't know a lot of districts that really says, what, let's hit the pause button and let's go back and let's retrain staff and let's retrain students so that our kids aren't on them 24/7.
Yep.
But I saw a lot of these things happening prior to COVID. And so in 2018, I stepped away and I started my doctoral work at the University of Illinois. And so I'm earning my work. I'm just starting my dissertation sequence right now on artificial intelligence and the impact it has on human cognition. And that really opened. It seemed like I started speaking on it, and I was asked by the Institute for Ethical AI and Education in the United Kingdom to join them. And so I spent 2.5 years working with members of parliament, academics, developers to create one of the world's first model codes of ethics for AI in education. I'm currently chairing a group in the UK for the Global Independent School Association. I think they said their schools deliver out educational services to 350 million kids globally. And I'm doing the AI piece on that. And I'm just doing a lot of work with other organizations. Retired from Effingham in May, but I am in consulting with Oak Ridge School District in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the Manhattan Project started. And it's really interesting because I'm hearing a lot of conversation about the relationship between the parallels between the Manhattan Project and the release of nuclear power, as we're seeing with AI. And I just lunch with one of the global leaders down there Friday. And that's been the interesting thing, is getting to meet with people like that, hear what's going on in the field, and then what do we as professional educators have to do to ensure that it's safe for our kids. So that's a lot of chatting, but I'm really enjoying the learning right now and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and work with a lot of districts around the country.
Yeah, you bet. Well, appreciate just that full background there, Joe, and knowing the different things that you're involved with, particularly with this topic and this moment in time with it. So, we've got a few things that want to unpack here with you during our time together related to AI. First off, just also congratulations, this stage of your career, to go back and work on a doctorate degree. That's outstanding. That by itself, when you get that thing wrapped up and done, we'll probably want to have a podcast just to talk about that part of it, and the only thing I'll remember the best piece of advice I got on a dissertation was, there's no dissertation like a done dissertation.
Well, that is the rumor on the street. And for someone who's lost in the middle of his lit review right now, I'm seeing the wisdom in that. So
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's like PTSD bringing that up here back in those days. But, I guess this may seem like a real obvious question to be asking here, and maybe one that doesn't need too much of an answer here, just because of your work and background, in teaching technology and being innovative and working with kids, doing the different things that you've done over the course of your career. So it might make sense that AI would line up with you and you taking an interest in that. But, what is it that really sparked you in this moment in time to really want to dig in and get a doctorate degree about it and be doing this work at this juncture?
Well, that's a really good question. And, one of the things that we have a lot, and this goes beyond Illinois, but specifically in Illinois, we have a lot of really outstanding teachers that I don't know the greater community knows how hard our teachers and administrators and bus drivers and support personnel work for kids. I mean, they are just sold out. And I know in Unit 40, it's common to drive by late in the evening or early in the morning or on a Sunday or Saturday, and there are people there all the time. And you see our teachers walking out the door. I used to kind of make the running joke with my wife, because she was a lower elementary teacher in her last couple of years, a math interventionist. And I was like, where was she traveling to today? Because it looked like she was going to the airport with all of the, stuff she was bringing along with her. But our teachers are sold out. And so one of the things that I like about the technology is its ability to increase productivity and really maybe help our staff members get some work-life balance back. There are a lot of people that are on the cusp of burning out. COVID amplified a lot of that. And I worry about young teachers that are starting families, and they're getting home and they've got kids and trying to cook dinner and do homework and, try to continue to strengthen their relationship with their spouse. For those of us that have had to deal with ailing parents and all of that, I mean, life still goes on. And the one thing that I guess if I could go back and do it all over again, Jason, I would become a bigger advocate for the health and wellness of staff. And it's one of the things that seems like we always give ourselves up because we know those kids need. And I don't know that the greater community knows the level people do that. So I started seeing with technology in my classroom how that I could increase my productivity, but also help prepare my kids for an emerging workforce that technology is deeply embedded in it. And so those are some positives, and we can get into some more of those a little bit later. But I also started looking at some of the concerns I had for the almost addiction level that kids sometimes have with it. And I go back to, I'm not sure that, in the early 2000s, if we could go back and do it again, and that and social media, if we would do things, if we would release them the same way with our kids. I mean, we've noticed CDC had a report a couple of years ago, teen suicides have increased 70% over the last 10 years. And a lot of it has to do with their self-image of who they are. And, I'll give this as an example. So a couple of years ago, we did one of the things I loved about my class is we did research studies all the time and really helped expose kids to things. And so one day I said, my co-teacher and I, okay, get your phones out, set them on your desk. And we wrote everything from text messaging to every social media platform that we knew at that time. And we put them on the board and we said, it's pretty simple. Whenever you get a notification, just get up, mark your name, do a tally mark on the board. Now, the kids, first of all, thought it was a trap. We were trying to find out, hey, illegally using cell phones in the classroom.
Right.
Well, we worked with our administration to find the appropriate ways to use them. And I really appreciate those guys for allowing us to do that. But after the first student got up, it was a very interesting thing because it almost became a badge of honor for everyone. Because I had one or two that got up. It was just nonstop. Every few seconds they were up. By the end of the hour, I had 174 interruptions in my class. And it was interesting because I also had some students that never got out of their chair. And I asked them we had a series of conversations, but specifically that. And they said, well, Mr. F, I'm not important enough to have those relationships. And I'm like, really? That's what you're basing your whole... But they do. They base... they're young and they're still trying to figure out
how many likes, right? How many hearts are they getting? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
And as adults, we do that too. We'll see friends. Well, why didn't I get invited to the barbecue? And so it's not just kids, but I had a girl in there go, I'm really frustrated because my boyfriend posted something on Instagram and I know I wasn't supposed to do it, but I liked it. And then I sent him a text and he's never answered me back. And that means he doesn't care for me. And so I started doing a lot of research. And I'd been at an event in DC where a guy talked about how some of this new technology was rewiring the brains of our kids.
Right.
And so
they're probably doing it for adults too, don't you think, Joe?
Yeah.
We're all, none of us are immune to this.
No, we're totally not. And I started going back and thinking about, I grew up the golden age of cartoons. And you may remember that on Saturday morning is like you could have your bowl of cereal and Pop-Tart and you were in heaven because you got lost for 4 hours.
Right. That's right.
And so those relationships were unidirectional. You could talk to Bugs Bunny or Scooby-Doo all day long. They never talk back. But you developed what they call a parasocial relationship. And those bonds are very, very strong. I remember like my wife and I are big Andy Griffith fans, the old ones back in the 60s. And when Don Knotts and Andy Griffith passed away, we felt like we lost a family member.
Yeah.
They didn't know who it's like that if you're watching your favorite sports team and they lose, you hurt for those players. Well, now with this new technology, it's bidirectional in many cases, and it is actively seeking out to attach and create relationships with you. And they talk about these synthetic relationships, and that's really hopefully the focus of my dissertation. As my lit review guides me to that is, I want to figure out what's the good, bad, and ugly of those parasocial relationships, because as we turn more and more devices over to kids, they're on them more and more, and that these systems can follow these kids 24/7 and reach out to them. What is that? And then the second part of the conversation is, I've been fascinated. One of the things I do is a big, deep conversation on the future of work. And you hear in a lot of cases that the new technology is going to take some jobs away, but they will be replaced with new jobs. But the skill sets are different. A checker at Walmart, if you go in today in Walmart, and I have a picture of one on my slideshow where it looks like a homicide outline of a dinosaur. And that's where I asked people what it is, and they're like, I don't know. And I said, well, that's where a real live checker used to stand and work at. Those jobs aren't anymore. So if we have kids that struggle through school, that were looking for entry-level jobs, where do they go work for us? And where do they go work? And actually, too, in a lot of what used to be white-collar jobs, they're going to look at a lot of automation. So somewhere along the way, we're going to have to figure out how do we provide our kids with the skills they need to thrive, not survive, in that age, and how do we make sure that technology is safe for our kids to consume? And that's difficult in a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is seeking, each company or each country trying to maintain that competitive edge.
Well, and not just work that they know what to do, but work that they find meaning in and everything else. When you think about what it really takes to help people survive or do more than survive, really thrive in the position, want to be doing it. Which then also, I think, improves mental health and a variety of things like that. So looking at this specifically from an AI perspective, Joe, you've hit on this, kind of touched on the teacher side of things, and what we can do maybe to be helpful for them, and of course, we're looking at that very, very seriously where school leadership is concerned, because we're dealing with the fact that we've got school leaders, maybe not, when somebody enters the profession, about half are leaving after 3 years. And when we say leaving, like, they're probably out altogether, selling insurance for a company or doing something like that. So we have deep concerns about that, and trying to figure out how do we help make the profession, everything else, more tenable when they're being asked to do a lot more, when they're being asked to deal with a school code that's doubled in size in the last 20 years, all of that stuff. So looking at this specifically from an AI perspective, what are you seeing right now as you're out and about in your studies and also in your travel, that you're seeing that could be helpful for educators in this moment in time? And then we'll get more maybe to the other side of it, is what are potential pitfalls and some of that. But anything in the early going here, because we obviously have some concerns related to adoption, the obvious fear that comes in with it. And this one's very different, it feels like, than any other type of technology that we've dealt with, because I think even educators, you talk about losing jobs to something, there's a lot of things in education that AI can help support here. I've had an opportunity to sit with Sal Khan and on an online demo to Conmigo, and what's happening there. It's fascinating, it's exciting, but a little spooky too. So what are your thoughts here in terms of the positive side of this?
Yeah, well, I want to even actually spread that beyond the school umbrella just briefly, because I think the thing that we don't need to do is rush out and panic. It's not that Skynet's here and
Skynet, a Terminator reference for those that need the cultural reference there. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Now, I will say, as we get into stuff schools can do later on, if you would remind me, I'd like to really talk about the communication piece to parents. Yeah. I really think that's important. But if you look, there are a lot of incredible things that are coming out. They just developed a new AI that I heard will identify breast cancer in women 5 years earlier. As we're in Breast Cancer Awareness Month, what I don't think anybody could ever complain about that. I mean, what a wonderful thing. And I would wonder, even as we get deeper into this, maybe 5 or 10 years from now, maybe they can identify it at the fetal level. It's phenomenal. They're figuring out, like University of Illinois is doing incredible work around AI in agriculture. And then there's how do you go through and help reduce the amount of pesticides and herbicides on fields, which hopefully eliminates the runoff that's going in and, messing with water systems and potential health issues with that. But also, by 2050, they say we need to increase our world's food supply by 70%. So, which is unbelievable. So how do we do that without putting more chemical on things? So having AIs that can go through and specifically say soybean, weed, take care of that one, and reduce things. We're looking at things on. I just had and one of the communities I'm working in, they're wanting to 3D print. They're wanting to 3D print a concrete house as a spec home. The school is, the kids are looking to design the home, and then they're looking to put in a smart grid that has an AI backbone in it so that they can look to reduce energy costs and things like that. Incredible, and just absolutely incredible things that we can do with AI. And we could sit here all day long and talk about it. On the school side, I think, and especially right now because of SOPA, Student Online Personal Privacy Act, a lot of the tools are not allowable yet for students. So I really call this the year of the teacher and the administrator. This is the year for you to go to explore. And I've kind of got a 13-step guide. I'm going to go through this on one of the administrative academies we're going to work and brainstorm how to actually do this, to put your diverse teams together, to look at things. But right now you can go in, and as long as you understand that sometimes ChatGTP or Bing or Bard, Google's version, and there are others out there. Somebody said that there were 5,000 new companies launched last month. just ridiculous amount of stuff going out there. But if I'm using those things, I might understand that the systems creates hallucinates, and so
Yeah.
everything's not exactly accurate. And
So
people
can you
don't.
just explain that because I've heard that term now a couple of times, Joe, what it means by when the AI is hallucinating, like
So
it's
we
coming up
create,
with
yeah.
something. Yeah, go
So I
ahead.
ask it to tell me the story of the D-Day invasion. And it's, that AI it's taken basically scraped the internet, everything off of it, and it's come back and it's interpreting, doing things, but there may be inaccuracies in there. That's basically what it is. It's an accuracy that it put. But you know what? Jason, several years ago when my room was adjacent to the library, I joked with my kids as we had somebody in our district that didn't want the kids to have access to Wikipedia because they said, well, it wasn't always accurate. And I said, you know what? The encyclopedia on the other side of my wall is so old as does not have the Kennedy assassination in it.
Right.
So maybe what we ought to do is train our kids on how to validate sources. That to me, especially in a day and age, and we'll get into this a little bit, where so much misinformation is out there, you need to do that. But you can go in. I asked ChatGTP, I say, go ahead and write me a lesson plan for a high school science class, physics class on why does time slow as you near the edge of a black hole. And I said, align it to the science standards. And I want you to put an SEL component in. And I want both a formative and a summative assessment. 2 seconds, I had a lesson plan.
Yeah.
Now, if I was a first year teacher and I'm probably coaching 2 sports, or I've got other sponsorship activities, I just got married, and I am drowning in paperwork, would I rather have my teacher spend 5 hours on Saturday digging through stuff, or would I rather have him or her take 2 seconds? Now, that doesn't mean it's perfect, but
Yep.
what it does mean that I should be able to take that information back to my department or to my PLC, and we should spend our time debating and working and massaging and making that lesson stronger. I've used it so all of a sudden I want to create a conversation in my class about the personal feelings that a soldier has when being asked to go to war. So I asked ChatGTP. I said, okay, British soldier, World War I, first days on the battlefield, getting ready to go over the top at any minute, waiting for the whistle. Write me 5 diary entries. The personal level that it wrote that at, people could not believe that it was written that way. And so what I would use that in a unit as, I would very simply say, all right, students, first of all, I want you to write a diary entry from everything that you've learned. Now I want you to hear this. Tell me what it got right and what it got wrong. So I'm working on that vetting of sources. Can you tell me what battlefield where this might have taken place at? And then I flip it and say, you know what? Typically, we look at it from our own myopic view. When we take world history, hopefully we do it a little bit bigger. But for a lot of us, we look at, military history from a Western view. Chat, please write this same piece from a German's perspective. Now let's have this conversation back about, what it's like from the macro to the micro. And as we go to war and we have to make decisions of voters and we're looking at supporting things, how do we do that? I have a young girl that comes into my class. She just came in. She's a second grader from Venezuela. She doesn't really speak English very well. She's kind of nervous and scared. So I go to chat and I said, you know what? I know that Juanita likes bunny rabbits. That's her thing. And so I said, chat, write me a story about a little bunny rabbit named Juanita who moved to a new community, and put an SEL unit in there so that I can help her understand what it's like and the gifts that she brings to this new community. And then I go to Bing and I say, all right, create me. And if you guys haven't used Bing and they've now integrated DALL-E into the art piece, I'd say, create me an image of this little bunny rabbit. Within 30 seconds, I could have that story and that image done. And I can personalize learning for my kids. So those are things on the instructional side. I think the other thing that I learned from my time in the UK was how do you, as you just mentioned this earlier, Jason, how busy our leaders are. How will you ever have time, or your tech director, how will he or she ever have time to sit down and really vet the new AIs that are coming out into your school?
Right.
And what do you want them there? How do you know how your data is protected? How do you know that they've done the best they can to make the system unbiased? How do you know what learning theories they're using? And are they ones that you support in your district?
Right.
Does it have an SEL element? And I know a lot of them say they do, but what is it? So to me, this is the time for administrators and teachers to put their team together, ask the question, why are we using this? And then go through and do exploratory this year. You can still showcase it to the kids. You know, the number one thing I'm hearing, and I'll shut down here, is how do we stop cheating? To me, what I want to do, I want to reverse that because we've been cheating since man learned how to write on cave walls, you know.
That's
How do
right.
we really promote that intrinsic motivation in our learners to make them where that's not an option? They don't want to do that. It's never going to get rid of it. But to me, those are the big things. And I think then the sharing through IPA, through your union, through social media platforms, because, you know, what's happening in Effingham and Elgin and Edwardsville, it's different, but there's still similarities. And I think we don't need to recreate the wheel all 1,000 times. Let's share it and co-create it together.
Yeah. Well, what I'm sitting here reflecting on, Joe, is as you're speaking there, what it makes me think about in terms of some of the real positive uses of AI as a tool is it just helps get you a good starting point and move you to a point to where then your expertise is needed to then move it forward. And when I think about that from an educational perspective, the thing that is always the critical element is the human connection between the teacher and the kid. And
Yeah.
so what I feel like what we can look at from a positive side of AI is it can help provide more time and space for that, right? Rather than dealing with the really the grind that comes with lesson planning and a whole bunch of other things, where there are now tools that can help us at least get started with that part of it, which I think is absolutely critical. One of the questions that I've got for you, Joe, though, is I agree with you. I think that we're in a good moment in time here. While everything still feels like it's moving quickly, it's maybe not moving as fast as we might think. That there is a window here where we do have to capitalize, or we need to capitalize on, is to get busy and start self-educating. So where do people start? I mean, you're obviously doing a couple academies for us, which we're grateful for, but beyond that, where are good sources of information that are trustworthy for people to be, thinking about this and how it will apply to them?
I think that's the hard part, Jason, is, I mean, you and I've talked,
Yeah.
how do you vet someone to know where
Well,
they're at?
especially when everybody's throwing stuff at you, right? Everybody's like, we're going to pick this moment in time. We've had these types of things before, where with new curriculum or new ways of doing things, whatever. But I don't know, not to be overly dramatic about it, but it does feel like the stakes are a little higher with this.
Well, I would tell you, I believe they're dramatically higher. And I've had, I mean, from people who have led this at the White House that I've talked to global, I have a meeting in a couple hours with someone from one of the top 3 or 4 companies in the world that this is his daily job. And, I'm fortunate to be involved in those conversations. And they said, actually, they never expected it to pick up speed at the rate that it is.
Yeah.
And if you go back, we hosted an event down in Oak Ridge back in July. If you remember, the movie Oppenheimer came out, and we brought in a filmmaker who did a documentary film called Oppenheimer: The Day After Trinity. And then we brought in Dr. Lynn Parker, who's the vice chancellor of University of Tennessee, but she was also led the AI initiative for the White House. We brought in one of the leaders from R&R Lab, Prasanna Prakash, who's one of the big AI leaders. We brought in people from nuclear energy sector, and they sat down with 5 kids on stage. And it was really a fun night because we talked from a kid's perspective to a global leader perspective on this. And one of the things that kind of came out of that was that the difference is that Oppenheimer and them dealt with, once they dropped, they let that bomb loose at Trinity. I think theoretically they knew what it was going to look like in their mind. They had no idea until that fireball
Right.
went off and the sound wave came on, and they're like, oh my, look at what we've done. And then Oppenheimer and those scientists said, we've got to figure out how to control this. And because of those people and other people, not everybody has access to a nuclear bomb today. More do than I wished had.
Yeah.
but we had a nuclear regulatory committee that came together, and today we do have nuclear energy that hopefully will help us with climate change. We're doing a lot on nuclear fusion right now that may solve our energy needs.
Right.
And
Yep.
so, but with AI, it didn't happen that way. When it was released, it's just been kind of released on the general public now. And now we've got nation states that are using it. We have other organizations that have both positive and dubious backgrounds. We have kids that are using it. And there wasn't a slow release. You can't put it back in the bag. It's
Right.
where we're at. But I'm going to say if I was a superintendent or a building principal like you're working with in your organization, I would tell them to put their team together. And the very first question I would ask is why? Why are we doing this? Now, my answer for that is from the people that I continue to talk with and the research that I'm doing, the future of work is changing literally and before our eyes so fast sometimes that we can't see it. We're so deep in the woods with what we're doing. Like I just saw over the weekend, I think it was 10 years ago, Amazon introduced robots. They introduced 1,000 of them. They now, 10 years later, have 750,000 of them. And so we're going on these exponential scales where you think about all of those jobs that are no longer necessary. And what does it look like to work in an AI enriched world? I think the other thing is thinking about the presidential election next year. How do you recognize media that is a fake? One of the things I do typically is when I come to schools, I introduce the staff to 3 foreign exchange students. And I talk to them about why they're coming to your prospective school or your respective school and all that. And then I stop and let them think about it a little bit. And I just say, these are deep fakes. It took me no time to create them. So how do our students understand, and this is just the front end of this, how 10 years from now, 20 years from now, how do they learn how to live in this space? Again, a lot of good, but that doesn't push away the negative. So what I would do is I put my team together, and I wouldn't force this on everybody. There are people who are just not ready for it yet. So why go and have that battle right now? You've got in your school, you've got some parents, you've got some teachers that would love to take this on to kind of do a beta testing on it. And then you figure out, okay, what do we need to learn and why? And what tools are we going to use? And I would start with teacher productivity. And I would have those conversations about how can it help reduce our stress load with our staff.
Well, and you mentioned, Joe, even communicating with parents. So I'm wondering, would this be an appropriate place to kind of plug that back
well,
in?
it totally is. And thank you for bringing that back up, because my number one concern is, Jason, is whenever Johnny and Susie go home, and mom and dad go, well, what did you do today? Oh, we did AI. Skynet comes up, all these horrible things, and it's not. And so I'm so much more on the transparency side. Parents and community members do need to know what's going on in our schools. It's very, very important for that. And we need to understand that maybe we as educators don't always know the best ways to do that. And so developing a strong communication platform where we can talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it and how it's helping prepare their kids for the future and what safeguards we're putting in place to make sure that it's safe for our kids. Then I think it creates a lot different conversation in the community, because they realize, and if you have ideas, come in. Here's a way for you to provide support for us to understand, because you may have a parent or community member out there that's really vested in that space and knows it, that can really come in and help you out at low cost, no cost to do some things.
So for you, Joe, when you're thinking about trying to keep yourself up to speed, see what's coming next, in the education space, of course, you're looking at things more broadly, but where's your go-to place? Is it the U.S. Department of Education that's doing a good job with this, or is it the corporations themselves, which I think some people will be a little suspect to because they're drivers and have other motivations and things that go along with it. But I do believe that there are people that do want to try to figure this out so that we have a positive result rather than a negative. But is it Microsoft, Google? Even groups like Amazon who seem to be, more on the merchandise side of things, but still are obviously heavily involved in this space. we are using, it feels like Amazon servers are powering everything anymore. So anyway, I just bring up a couple of examples there. Where are your go-to places
No,
for
that's an important
information?
question. I would do both, honestly. That's where I do. I look at it for a couple of different reasons. On the educational side, um, I go UNESCO. They just released a report on an AI toolkit for educators, that I think really has some good stuff in it. You're going to hear a lot of conversation around responsible AI. I think that's really, really important for you to look at what responsible AI looks like. I think that definition is going to change dramatically in the future. I don't, from what I've seen, and if somebody listening hears it and you find something, please send it to me. But I haven't seen a lot on those relationships that are formed. I see a lot on the other things. But I go there to them. I think U.S. Department of Ed has developed uh, a brief on AI for education. A lot of this is still very high level stuff because
Of
a lot of
course,
people haven't done the work in the classroom. ASCD and ISTE are both, I guess you know, but they've combined
merged.
now
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
spent a lot of time talking to their leadership. And I think they're doing some really good stuff in that space. Um, those would be my main go-tos. I think at our state level, this is not a knock. I think the key players are still trying to figure that out, and they're trying to figure out who's going to move and do what, next. And that's just kind of where we're at. I know the governor's got a task force coming out here shortly that I'm excited about because I think one of the good things coming out there is they're looking, from what I understand, the broad spectrum of AI across society, and education will be a component of it. But I like the fact that it's not just a standalone, because a lot of times, this, we do standalones here and we do standalone over here, and then we wonder why we can't bridge the gap.
Right.
I do go spend a lot of time with Microsoft and Google and Amazon, those IBM's doing incredible work in this space, because I want to see what they're creating for organizations outside of education. They are doing stuff for education, but what are they doing for the outside in the business world? And what are academics then doing? University of Illinois is doing incredible work. I follow a lot of the academic research, but it shows me maybe where the future of work's going. And what we want is our kids to be prepared to have jobs down the road. And beyond that, we want them to be healthy, happy, productive citizens. And so I'm trying to figure out what scaffolding needs to go in between those spaces. And I think the piece that's dragging up the rear, but I do follow a lot at UNESCO. I follow a lot of our policymakers, and just as they're trying to get out there and get some stuff done, what will policy look like? Because we know at some point, whether we like it or not, policy is necessary to drive some of this stuff because some people
Mm-hmm.
just won't respond. And what I tell people is, with my time with Advanced Illinois and at Instoy, I think the only thing worse than no policy is bad policy. And so I don't think
We
people
get plenty of that, Joe.
yeah, we do.
Right.
But
Yeah.
let's stop that ship. And how
Yeah.
do we create organic policy
Mm-hmm.
and I know, boy, this is one is like, a new thing, but how do we create policy that can change with this? Because if I have a device, Jason, that gets regulated, and this is where it's at to 2023, but because of machine learning and its ability to morph and change, and a lot of times as developers, people don't necessarily understand what's going on behind the black box walls. So will it still be the same thing that we endorsed in 2027? And so what have we learned also with academic research? And you know how hard policy is to change. I just think we're going to have to look at that differently moving forward. And I think that's probably the thing that most of the developers are concerned about, is we get a static policy in place that slows innovation here in the US, and it creates a pipeline of opportunity for countries all over the world that maybe don't work in the same space as us. So I get where they're going, but I
Mm-hmm.
also understand we have to have a regulatory process so that our students and teachers kind of aren't lab experiments along the way, even though we
Yeah.
know they're probably going to be a part of it.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrapping up here, Joe, because we could go on and on. I got a bunch of questions here, but there is one thing in particular that I'm kind of curious about from your perspective, because you are much further ahead than most educational leaders are with this, that are maybe just now going to a session or a conference, or going to attend this academy, or watch this IPA talk as they're starting to get their minds wrapped around it. Who do you see, be it maybe at the national level or at the country level, or maybe organizationally, even at the schoolhouse? Do you have an example or examples of who do you feel like is handling this moment in time well, where AI is concerned, that might be a good place for people to pay attention to? And that may not be a fair question yet. Maybe we're too early in this to even to have a response to that. But I just was kind of curious from your perspective, if you've got any, anybody out there that you see. Obviously, it's that help me not reinvent the wheel, help me to know whose lead I need to be following. Maybe it's the corporations themselves. Just kind of curious about who is it at the top of your list, especially where education is concerned, that we really need to be watching.
Well, it is really, it's interesting because I feel like we need to pick up the pace a little bit, but we're still early in the game. Mm-hmm. And so I do go back to those organizations.
Which probably brings some people some comfort, by the way, Joe, is to know that we're not totally off the rails here, right? That, like, I think people need to feel like they still have some time to, and always the right time to start is right now. But right. Anyway.
Well, yeah. The first thing I would do is, again, I would not go into a panic. Because that doesn't solve anything, and
right.
And I don't think we've got, our schools are filled with brilliant people. We can figure this out. I remember we brought the internet to school in 1994. We thought it was going to be the end of time. I do think this is a lot different. There's a great podcast out there called Your Undivided Attention. If you ever watched, I would start with watch the movie Social Dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't seen it? Go watch Social Dilemma and see the impact that that developers saw that social media was having on it. And these guys are the same people that produced it, and now they're spending an inordinate amount of time on AI and new social media.
I think it's on Netflix, right? Because I watched that.
It's on there right now. Go pick it up and watch it. And then I've had a good conversation, and I will give them a shout out to people at Illinois Math and Science Academy. I know they are looking to do, and I don't know if I'm saying this exactly right, but they're one of the flagship schools in the state because they have a lot of responsibility there. I really think leadership's trying to do some to do some really good things. I've seen regional offices of education that are starting to offer training. I've done several. I'm going to continue to do several. And, I spoke at one back in the late summer. I had 200 administrators at, and they're very interested. But like you said, when the doors open to school, now they're inundated with everything else. Mm-hmm. I think the work that I'm very excited about that is happening at Oak Ridge School District in Tennessee. I'd look outside your state. They're really looking to have some deep conversations about how do we prep our kids for the future. And what I love about there is we can't do this alone. So how do we work together with community partners? I think it's really time that we come together to do those things. But to me, COVID gave us a chance, if anything, I think, to do two things. One, to understand the value of life. And two, to maybe come back and reimagine what school would be like. I think, we would be naive to think school hasn't changed since COVID. And so it is going to continue to change. And I think the other piece of this is, AI is just one component. So we used to be these technologies kind of stayed in their silo. I'm very interested in what's happening with quantum computing right now.
Yeah. And Illinois is a leader there for sure, right? University of Illinois and other places.
Yeah, University of Chicago and University of Illinois. And this is where, and I hope that the governor and some of the other people who were involved in ushering this in get to hear, or somebody tells them, thank you for helping make our state an epicenter for technology research and development. I brag them up every time I get out in a public setting. But I would also say this, I really feel like there's a huge disconnect between the K-12 sector and those jobs. We are going to have some tremendous opportunities as this continues to go forward, but I worry about kids in urban centers. I worry about kids downstate. We're talking about with this new digital act that the president signed, where we're going to try to bring broadband across the state.
Yep.
What an incredible opportunity, but it's not being created to download Netflix videos faster. And so we got to put these entrepreneurial mindsets in our kids and our communities. And so I'm excited about the future. I'm excited we have organizations like yours, Jason, that want to have these conversations. I hope to continue to engage them. And I would just tell other people, start it on your own, and you'll find like-minded people, or people who aren't like-minded. Both are important, because we need to be pushing people back on this thought processes.
Well, Joe, sure appreciate the opportunity to connect on this. Grateful for you running a couple of administrator academies. I'm sure we'll want to have follow-up conversations on this topic as we see things continue to evolve, and of course, want to see the results of your dissertation, because that'll be fascinating. I'm sure about that. And I, just as a note here for those watching in the show notes, I think it'd be great if we could add in a couple of the links to the various places that you referenced. So we'll be sure to grab a hold of those things too, and make those available if people are looking for a good place to go from there. Joe, if people are interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably the best way is just find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Well, actually, there's a lot of great stuff going on in that space. And I would also tell you, I'm not the world sole authority on this. And somebody tells you are, that's one of them you probably need to move past. I'm trying to learn as much as I can offer. And I would love to hear from both sides, things that you feel like I've got right, things that I feel like maybe I could do better at. And I would love to hear what you're doing, so that maybe, Jason, down the road, people have places at ISBE's website, IPA's website, IASB's website, and others where there are resources and things to go for learning tools that we can offer them up. And just appreciate what you guys do and trying to create a great group of administrators out there that I know care deeply for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for your time today, Joe. Sure appreciate it. Got Joe Fatheree here with me talking about AI, of course, a storied career in education, and just appreciate the time. My name is Jason Leahy, Executive Director here at IPA. As always, if there's anything you need, don't hesitate to give us a call, or you can check us out on the web at ilprinciples.org. Take care.